Hey, everybody. Hey! Hello.
Hey,
Okay, I think.
Melissa.
Hey, Francesca.
All right, great.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the Caregiver Coffee Chat Podcast with me, your mom mentor and caregiver coach, Melissa Miller. I am so excited for today because today is kicking off season 1, and I have an incredible guest an incredible guest to interview today. Her name is Dr. Francesca Owoo. She is a licensed professional therapist,
Mhm.
and she also has experienced some difficulties in managing her own chronic illness, as well as caregiving for elderly parents with some really complex health issues of their own. So she gets it. It's tough be balancing your professional career, as well as just your own self-care if you yourself are chronically ill, as well as caring for someone who is sick, be it your spouse, like in my case, or for her, it's her parents, or maybe you might be a mom who has a chronically ill kiddos. So wherever are at in that dynamic, I want you to just tap in and listen to what we have to share today. And I hope that it will encourage you in your journey, because we understand that it's very overwhelming. It's scary
Mhm.
to be hit with this unexpectedly. And also we
Absolutely.
will be opening it up for some Q&A at the end. So leave those questions in the comments below and we will try to go back through those towards the end. But anyway, welcome, Dr. Owoo. Thank you for being a guest to help me kick off season 1. I am so excited to
Absolutely.
have you here. Could you tell us a little bit about your story and your business of what you do?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this. You know how I feel about lives, but I'm excited for you having me here. So, a little bit about myself. Where do you want me to start? Because that's a long story. So, I don't want to bore your listeners.
Well,
So,
let's start with the side of your chronic illness, because I know that's
okay.
going to play into your caregiving story of your journey.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the specific chronic illnesses that you deal with and what that journey was like for you.
So I was diagnosed with fibroids, I believe, around 2013. The timeline gets a little sketchy because when you're in pain, you don't really pay attention to certain things. So I was diagnosed with fibroids around 2013. I had my first surgery in 2015. And then with that surgery, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, a backwards reproductive system, and adenomyosis. So then the second surgery dealt with the endometriosis. So my reproductive organs were backwards. My intestines were connected to the uterus, fallopian tubes and ovaries connected to the uterus, and pinned to my rectum.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch is correct. Ouch is correct. So when you get a diagnosis like that, it almost brings some sort of peace because you know that there's definitely something wrong, instead
Right.
of being gaslit by medical professionals and friends and family saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. That's just your period. And I'm saying it today, periods are not meant to be painful.
Yeah.
They're not meant to be painful. They're not meant to feel as if you are actually trying to talk to Satan at the time when you're having your cycle. It's not supposed to happen.
No.
So, and I was having the first and second surgery was during my doctoral program. So that was also it was very intense for me at the time. And also during that time, I noticed that of course, we all notice that our parents are getting older. And it was on my mind that eventually one of the siblings is going to have to, take care of our parents. And it happened to be me.
Right. So, what are the symptoms that you deal with your chronic illnesses? Because you could have, I know speaking to myself with my
Mm-hmm.
experiences I have with epilepsy, since that's my
Mm.
expertise, or I've had to make that my expertise with caring for my epileptic husband.
Mm-hmm.
What are the symptoms that you experience? Because everyone's different. And even if
Right.
we could have like 50 people, as you will know, in the room with the same
Absolutely.
diagnosis, but their symptoms will all be varying and different. So what are the what are the symptoms, for example, for you that you have with your illness? And what are the unique red flag symptoms that you know that, oh, I'm about to have a flare up or I'm on the tinge of a
Right.
flare up and I better take a step back so I don't exasperate it?
Absolutely. So for me, in the beginning, the symptoms were just extreme nausea. I was nauseous all the time. and it reached a certain point where I couldn't stomach food and I couldn't stomach liquids. So I was literally just drinking water or just not eating anything at all, and extreme amounts of pain. So in researching fibroids, I looked at Uncle Google and none of these symptoms were listed. I thought it was very odd. And I was like, something else has to be going on. So when I was diagnosed with endometriosis, I said, this explains everything. From the nauseousness, not being able to stomach any certain foods or liquids, the extreme amounts of pain, the lack of sleep, the intense migraines. And I knew there was something else going on aside from the fibroid. So when I got that other diagnosis, I thought, okay, so this is what it is. And pertaining to flare-ups, if I'm in extreme amounts of stress, I know more than likely a flare-up is going to happen, because you have to make sure that you are calm. And it's kind of hard being calm at all times when you're a caregiver, right? Because
Absolutely.
there might be moments where you just have to be on task with the person that you're taking care of and on task with your job and any other projects that you have. So it's important for me to remain calm. It's important for me to always have this obnoxiously large mug with me that has tea in it. Tea. For some others, it might be something else. I don't know. I'm always drinking tea. I'm always trying to remain calm at all times. And I admit, sometimes I am not. Sometimes it can get to me. I am not Superwoman, nor was I meant to be. So there are times when I just might want to be by myself and not talk to anyone and read a book or do something creative online or draw or color, or sometimes just sit and be with God and just mind my business. So everything else around me might be chaotic. I have to make sure that I try to keep my blood pressure down, because I also do have hemiplegic migraines. So those can also be very intense. It could last for about a week to 2 weeks. Sometimes it might even last a whole month. So I have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that it's not affecting me. Everybody else, whatever they have going on, they have going on. I just need to make sure that I need to be taken care of. Because sometimes as caregivers, we forget that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if I'm not well, more than likely everything around me that I have to take care of is not going to get done. So I have to make sure that I'm taken care of.
Right. And I think that's so interesting when we're talking about chronic illnesses. A lot of chronic illnesses are diagnosed after everything else has been omitted. I know for me, with dealing with hypothyroidism is more, there's actually an actual test that one can test to see if that is the problem. And for me, it was with that illness. But for the IBS, that was a year of doctors in and out of doctors for appointments for a year, and doing, an elimination diet and a whole bunch of other things. We'll just leave it at that. It was crazy. And it really came down to, for me, either being diagnosed with my GI doctor was pretty sure that either I had IBS or I had IBD. Irritable bowel disorder can be diagnosed with having a sample out of your colon. IBS
never any fun.
Yeah, no. And IBS is really a culmination after that has been omitted. So that's what we did. I mean, I'm thankful there was a way that we could for sure find out.
Right.
And that now I'm on medication, and I know I've learned how to manage my diet, but everyone's different.
Absolutely.
And diet, and I think it's important for people who are new to dealing with chronic illness that it's not going to look the same for everybody.
Right.
And multiple symptoms can be the same or similar for multiple illnesses. So speaking to my two, the common symptom that you get with both hypothyroidism and IBS is you have a sluggish gut system. And so you can't process food very well. And so I got when I was diagnosed in my early 20s, like 15 years ago with hypothyroidism, I went plant-based to deal with that. That was the best thing I could do to deal with that. But for my IBS, I've had to really extend those limited diet restrictions even more. So now I'm gluten-free, soy-free, grain-free. There's not really a lot I can eat, but I know I need to do that as a form of self-care with being a caregiver myself as well. That, like you say, if you don't keep that cup full, you can't fulfill your duties as a caregiver. Right. And I'm a mother as well. I have a 3-year-old, so I have multiple roles that I need to fill. And like you as well, with being an online entrepreneur as well, our clients depend on us, right? So if we don't take care of ourselves, it's just going to really be a house of cards. And so I think that's really important that I want to just reiterate that there's no one size fits all approach for caregiving and for
Absolutely.
self-care for caregiving. And also there's no one size fits all diagnosis or
Mm-hmm.
symptoms per se for anyone with a chronic illness. I know with my husband with
Mm-hmm.
epilepsy, it's usually diagnosed as a child, or if you have
Mm-hmm.
history in your family tree. But he was diagnosed in his early 50s with no
Oh,
prior
wow.
history of seizures as a child, and no one in his family tree had epilepsy or a seizure
Mm-hmm.
disorder. So he's in that 20 to 30% of the population that for no apparent reason
Yeah.
it happens. And same thing with hypothyroidism. There's it. I was born with a normal thyroid, but in my
Mm-hmm.
early 20s, something happened. We don't know why. There's no way
I'm
to really
telling you,
figure it out.
it's
To
the food.
Yeah. So
It's the
anyway,
food.
so it's just important that I think that
Mm-hmm.
people are educated and aware that chronic illness is becoming more common, and
Absolutely.
it's different for everybody. And so we need to really give people grace when they're saying, listen, you may we may look fine, but there's a
Right.
firestorm going on the inside, whether it's with our gut,
Absolutely.
whether it's with, in my husband's case, his brain. 500 extra signals in his brain are going off when he's having a seizure that should not be there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just
Absolutely.
so many different things. So anyway, so now that we understand the timeline and journey of your chronic illness, how does that play into knowing that now you're compromised with your own health? How did that combine? Probably, I'm guessing, not so well with the timeline of when your parents started to have complex health issues, as we know will happen, with the age
Right.
demographic. We
Right.
know that at some point we're going to have to start making decisions on how to care
Mm-hmm.
for our parents, our grandparents. That's to be expected. But what
Mm-hmm.
was the timeline for that like when you're trying to get your brain wrapped around dealing with your own health, but then having to start making those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
choices and decisions for what do I do to take care of my mother and father? How do I make sure their needs are met? And how do I deal and educate myself on those
Mm-hmm.
complex health issues? Because I know for me, I have the leg up of at least having 15 years in healthcare, but I still was overwhelmed from the standpoint that in my 15-year career, I never had a patient with epilepsy specifically or seizure disorder. So it really felt like I was back in med school again, trying to educate myself as well as I could about my husband's illness. But I was also just overwhelmed and frustrated with the fact that there was such a lack of information because there's so much that we
Mm-hmm.
don't know about his illness,
Right.
for one. And two, it's not curable. So it's like, oh, this is so much to
Yeah.
take in all at once. So what was that like for
Absolutely.
you and your journey?
So, being in a doctoral program and then also getting frequent calls from my siblings about this is what's going on with mom pertaining to cancer. So while I was in the doctoral program being diagnosed, my mother was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer, and my father was also diagnosed with prostate cancer. So it was a lot going on. And also my sibling was having complications with sickle cell disease. So I am in Ohio and they are all in New York State. So it was a lot. So I found myself kind of driving back and forth until I realized I can't do this anymore because physically I could not do it anymore. There was one trip that I took. It took me about 11 hours to get home because I had to stop at every rest stop. And I realized at that time that what I was doing was not right for me because I had to change. Do people call them feminine napkins or something they call them nowadays? Um, I had to change every 30 minutes, which was not, it just didn't make any sense. I
No.
wasn't understanding it at the time until I had finally found the right doctor. After 7 doctors, I found the right doctor who was actually going to diagnose me properly and give me a certain form of treatment, which would be the surgeries and medications later on. But I realized that I was hemorrhaging when she explained that to me. Every 30 minutes is not okay. And we're going to need to take you off of all these other medications your PCP has you on and start you on a brand new regimen. So while this is going on, I'm also getting news that my mom has stage 2 colon cancer, dad has prostate cancer. And I'm thinking, oh my God, everything is coming crashing in on me at once. I don't know how to deal with this because I'm in another state. So my brother was taking care of my parents at the time, going back and forth. And I'm pretty sure that's how he got sick in the first place because he is doing everything on top of having the job that he has, which is also very strenuous. So
Yes.
it was a lot for us. So now that I am here, it seems like, the pressure has been relieved from him and I'm doing the caregiving, but it's also a lot for me because my father is in a different country. So my sister's taking care of him, but they're still on my mind that I'm worried about him. That, when parents reach a certain age, they think, they're spring chickens, they can still do what they used to do. It's like, no, I am the parent now and you are the child. This is what we're going to have to do in order to keep you here. So let's stop thinking that we can go outside and do everything that we're not supposed to be doing at this age when you are not feeling well. And the same goes for my mom. There will be instances where I have to get something done and she is just not doing well. So that puts stress on me in order to, I have to come in and see my clients. Basically, you have to compartmentalize whatever's going on in your life. You can't come in and tell your clients, oh my God, this is what's going on with my personal life. They don't care. They don't want to know. They don't want to know. They know that they're coming into the session and they're having issues. So you need to be able to do what you need to do at that point in time. So I'm also cognizant that I'm taking care of her, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm taking care of my clients. But I also realize sometimes I do have a bad habit of putting myself on a back burner and keeping myself on that back burner for quite some time. So I am learning relearning how to integrate the things that I love, because this is, to a certain extent, it's new for me. I've been taking care of her for the past 4 or 5 years, but it's still new for me when certain symptoms pop up. And also when I am starting a business online, I am so used to seeing my clients in person, and I love being a therapist. I love what I do with my couples and my families. I just love seeing people in person. But
Right.
doing this online, it works for me as a caregiver because, once again, I can do everything I need to do at home, and I can also see my clients online in 3 different states. So,
Yeah. I think that's important to realize too, that with your journey, both with your chronic illness and in caring for someone with a chronic illness, you're going to have different seasons.
yes.
Um, the season that we're in right now is obviously different than the season we were in a couple of years ago. And the season that we're in now is for sure going to be different compared to where we're going to be at in a couple of years. Okay. And that's fine. Okay.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that. So one thing that I know I teach my moms is that and for those watching and listening to this replay, if you're watching this later on or listening later on, I want to reiterate that it's okay. Give yourself grace. Right now, I want you to
Absolutely.
figure out your balance. Find your balance for what makes you tick, what really works in the season that you're in now, right now. Right now, you might be in a season, I know for me personally, with my self-care and what I need with dealing with all the trauma that my family's been through the last 2 years with the pandemic, dealing with toilet training a daughter and my husband's chronic illness,
Yeah.
and being in a season now where we're really looking towards more aggressive treatment because the standard medications for his unique journey of dealing with epilepsy is just not enough. We're looking at device placement and surgery as well. I need to amp up on that spiritual self-care. So prioritizing that
Absolutely.
30 to 45 minutes a day when I come in here before I even start work Monday through Friday. The weekends I
Absolutely.
do it a little bit differently because I am off the clock and I take care of my family, and I adjust my spiritual time, but I still get that time in. It's a little different. But either way, I'm making that intentional time to focus on self-care
Absolutely.
for the spiritual point because I need that to keep me sane. It helps me mentally and emotionally as well. Now, that's this year. Last year, when I was dealing with not knowing that I had IBS, and I was going through to doctor after doctor after doctor and just struggling to find the right answers and the appropriate treatment, like what you went through in a season with your caregiving or with your chronic illness as well, I was really amping up on this physical self-care. I was
Right.
omitting
You have
stuff out of
to.
my diet. I was in and out of doctor's appointments. So that year was more focused on my physical well-being. So for those
Absolutely.
of you listening, where are you at? Where are you weakest? I love what my Christian life coach says. She's my 2 Christian life coaches, Erin and Andrea, they talk about at the beginning of the week, they always remind us in our group that do a check-in at the beginning of the week. Where are you weakest? Is it physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual self-care? And once you know or aware or conscientious, over the weekend, the Lord gave me this little nugget. He said, being diligent will pay off, but you also need to be conscientious about where you're struggling and where you need to amp up a little bit more in your self-care. So you need to pay attention to that. Okay.
Absolutely.
So maybe for this season, you might be needing to focus more on spiritual self-care, like I am. Or maybe you might be in a season where your physical health is taking a hit because you're in that season of not having the appropriate diagnosis and in turn treatment, like what both Francesca and I have both gone through with our chronic illnesses. And it took a while for my husband too. And, and there was those, and I'm sure Francesca went through that as well with her parents. Like, it's, something's wrong, but then you have to still go through the process of seeing the doctors and getting the appropriate treatment. So where are you at in that season? And how can you work on getting to where you need to be in that season and amp up in that season? And it's going to be different. And boundaries,
Absolutely.
I think it's important that let's tie in boundaries here, right? Some, like Francesca says, we as online entrepreneurs, we do have to have boundaries. We do have to say no. But even if you're not a mompreneur like I am, or an online entrepreneur like like Dr. Owoo is, it's still important to compartmentalize it a little bit, okay? It's okay to say no. You don't have to say yes to everything. Saying yes all the time is saying no to something else.
Exactly.
Okay.
More than likely yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Do not put yourself on the back burner. The number one symptoms that are kind of more common in the last 2 years that I've really learned with chronic illnesses that are very similar are stress, lack of nutrition, and missing treatment. So whether that be meds, whether that mean shots, whether that mean watching the diet. For me, my issue is eating trigger foods that I should not eat, even though I miss them. I have to be careful and not being diligent.
That's a different subject.
About looking at the labels to make sure you're not eating something that you should not be eating. So it's going to look different for everybody. Okay.
Absolutely.
But the main thing here is I want to encourage you to really look at what you need and use that as your Bible, so to speak, for lack of a better term. Use that as your Bible. What can you say no to? What do you need to say no to? What do you need to do to make sure that you have that healthy boundary and balance? Remember, we're talking about finding a healthy balance, managing a chronic illness, and potentially maybe balancing somebody else's chronic illness in your life. Where do you need to kind of step back? What do you need to actually start saying no to have more time to say yes to? What do you need to do to prioritize that time to where you don't tap out and burn out every day, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes every day? And what do you need to do to surround yourself with a support network to make sure you get what you need? So maybe maybe for you need to talk to someone that's not, because here's the thing, this is why I was so excited that we're agreeing to come to be a guest on my podcast, because you're a licensed therapist. I know for me, there's been seasons in my life where having an intentional conversation with a professional counselor or therapist has been huge for me. Why? Absolutely. Because they're trained to handle the mental capacity and trauma and emotions that we as human beings don't know sometimes how to process, and it's not our fault. Sometimes we need that outward outlet. But the other component is sometimes we need to be around somebody that isn't so close to our situation. Even though our family, our friends, our spiritual advisors mean well, they're still too close to the situation. Sometimes we just need a safe place to be able to call out the crap for what it is. We need to just be able to shout, yell, and scream and cry to get it out of our system, to be able to release it and then be able to go, okay, I got that out of my system. Now I can move forward, and we can have that guidance from a third party to move forward. And it's interesting. I think it's interesting that even though you're not married, you're still licensed, you're passionate about helping families and couples. I think that's so beautiful and helpful, because here's the thing. I know, speaking for myself, being a wife of a chronically ill person, it takes a lot of impact on your marriage. Okay, let's just be honest. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. When you are in a marriage and you are touched by an unexpected chronic illness or injury, it impacts your marriage and your relationship. And it's not because either one of you did anything wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not pointing fingers here. But just the dynamic shifts because you have to make all these decisions in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
And you're also at the same time grieving the life that you anticipated. We did not anticipate, I know speaking for us, we did not plan on me being a stay-at-home mom because we financially couldn't afford it. We were going to work opposite shifts so we could offset the cost of daycare and not impact our family members who do live in the valley where we live, but also have lives and health issues of their own. So we're going to be sensitive to that. And then we were also just anticipating not having to deal with that caregiving piece for either one of us until we anticipate. Usually we don't anticipate caring for our spouses under the ages, before the age of 65. Usually the kids are grown, then you expect the body to start breaking down and dealing with those, health issues that come down the pipeline with age. But that happened sooner than that for us. Our daughter was almost 1 when my husband started having seizures. And we had just gotten through the hurdle of 6 years of infertility. So we thought that was the worst thing that we were ever going to go through in our marriage, right? No, my husband gets sick, right during a pandemic too. It was just chaotic. So I want you to be aware of that for your relationship. Sometimes you might need that third party. So talking about, I know it's not fun to go there, but how it impacts you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, intimately, financially, even just how you parent. I know for us, that's been hard for my husband. He can't drive anymore. He can't ever be home alone with our daughter anymore, just for safety. It's not that he's a bad husband or a bad father, but if he has a seizure and there's not another adult here and he's home alone with our little girl, she can't triage. She can't call 911. She can't take detailed notes so that way I can be able to have that important information to give to our doctors when we need to make decisions about what we do next with my husband's treatment. Oh, there's a new symptom. Okay, do we need to look at adding something else to his medication regime? Or is it another red flag that, you know what, this is just not working. We need to look at something that's more aggressive. And for us, that has been the case. Medication just isn't doing it. So we need to find a more permanent seizure control regime of either device placement or potentially surgery. But it's going to look different for everybody.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say that if you're in a marriage or a relationship with a significant other and you're caregiving, one of you is chronically ill and you're having to and you have small children like I do, it's okay to ask for help from a third party. And sometimes you really need that. I hate, this absolutely drives me up the wall. I hate how there's this big stigma about seeing a counselor or therapist. They're professionally trained and they have resources and can do referrals that if you need even more help than what they can give you, like say if you decide to work with Dr. Owoo, I am sure she has a plethora of other resources she can direct you in because she's professionally trained to know what the best resources are. Because sometimes for seasons, we need that. It doesn't mean, if you're listening to this or watching this, listen to me. It doesn't mean you're a bad wife. It doesn't mean you're a bad mom. Absolutely. It doesn't mean you're a bad daughter or a son. It doesn't mean you're a bad sibling if you need help. Caregiving is a hard journey.
It is.
It's a marathon. Dealing with a chronic illness is a marathon and a hard journey. It's not a sprint. And there's going to be different seasons. And with those seasons means I need to really make sure I amp up on getting the right support that I need. So, and if you're in a season where you don't have that kind of support, dang, I want to make sure that is not you. Because that was me 2 years ago. I did not have that kind of support. And with this podcast of the Caregiver Coffee Chat Podcast, I really want this to be an opportunity for you to tap into some other experts for self-care, for motherhood, for caregiving, for chronic illness. Just so you know that you're not the only one on the planet that's dealing with X, Y, and Z, right? I don't know about you, Dr. Owoo, but one of the things that does hit you when you're dealing with the throes of a chronic illness and being a caregiver is you do feel like you're on an island, and then you culminate that with need to be home full time to take care of your family or your significant other or your children or your parent or grandparent. It does feel isolating. I mean, I chose to do an online business, and I love what I do, and I know you do too, but still, it is quite different, isn't it? Having a conversation via online like this versus actually being in a actual brick and mortar building. It is different.
It's different. It's different, but it's doable. And we had to learn just as a society how to adjust to what was going on with the world. We didn't know what was happening with the pandemic that was happening. And if there was something going on with you before the pandemic, I'm more than likely sure that it increased during the pandemic, because you're not out, you're not being able to go outside to see your friends and your family and spend holidays together. So that is something that takes a toll on your mental health. And it's something that takes a toll on your interpersonal relationships, because some people need to be around other people.
Oh,
Whereas for me,
absolutely. I'm glad you said
yeah.
that. Absolutely. Yeah. For those who are introverts, it might have been hallelujah, praise the Lord. I don't have to talk to you. But then for people like me, I am a social
Uh-huh.
butterfly. So I have
Mm-hmm.
lived for, I know for me personally, I have lived for when I have my coaching calls with my coaches and things like that. And like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, even just with things opening it back up where we are, where we can do inline or not, excuse me, in-person church services and classes again each week. That's just been wonderful for me to connect, because we do need that human connection, like it or not. Even if you're an introvert, we do need a little ounce of connective connecting with others. I'll leave it at that. We
Mm-hmm.
do need that connected piece because we can't
Mm-hmm.
thrive. We're human beings. We're
Right.
we're meant to be, you know, years ago, you know, in the caveman years, you know, we lived in tribes and all these kind of different things. So
Mm-hmm.
we need that. We cannot survive without that human interaction. And for different parts of the population, speaking to what I know about my prior healthcare career as a CNA for the with working with the dementia and elderly population, it was a huge hit during the pandemic for that population because they even just being able to get out of their room and talk with other residents of the nursing
Mm-hmm.
facility,
Yeah.
they couldn't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were just secluded in their room, and we had to
Right.
bring their food to them. PT would come in and see them individually. They didn't get to do group exercises where they'd get to
Mm-hmm.
do activities together. They couldn't dine and have meals
Absolutely.
together. Their families couldn't come visit for safety. So those that had family members that could, they might come and knock on the window and talk on their
Mm-hmm.
phone, and we did that, tried to accommodate that so they could have a little bit. But what about the family? What about those that didn't have any family anymore, that either
Mm-hmm.
lived out of state or they're the last of their family and there's no one to come visit them?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's a huge hit. You know, it's a huge hit for the person who's sick because they're getting the rug pulled out from under them. They can't do the things. For me, it's my diet. I
Mm-hmm.
can't eat things that I used to, and that's frustrating. For my husband, he can't. It's impacted our marriage in terms of how he parents, how he provides for a
Mm-hmm.
family. He can't work full time anymore. He can't drive. I mean, the big things that one takes for granted for independence are gone. And that's tough.
Right.
And for men specifically, if there's any men listening to this, I see you and I hear you. I get it. Men are providers, men are fixers. And so
Mm-hmm.
the one time, so to have that manhood ripped apart from you of like, oh,
Right.
you can't drive, you can't work full time to provide for your family. And you're having to rely on government assistance. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard.
It
I'm
is
not,
hard, and that's one
that's,
thing I usually address with my couples: the role reversal
yeah,
of the stereotype that the man has to be the provider and the woman is a stay-at-home wife. Well, society is changing.
yes, it
So
is changing.
society is changing. So it is okay to switch roles. At some point in time in your marriage, that is going to happen. There's going to be some form of role reversal where
Mhm.
one person might be taking more of the load, one person is taking less of the load, and vice versa. And that's something
Mhm.
that I always discuss with my couples and couples counseling is it's okay. We just need to learn how to work this out and who is going to do what and who is okay with doing what and how we're going to actually handle this. Now, if there's children involved in the situation, that's also another added stressor to a certain extent if one spouse is doing majority of the child care.
Mhm.
But we also know in society that usually it's women who are doing predominantly of the child care in the first place. So it's also important for us to realize what role we want to take on and what we can actually contribute to the relationship. Because if you're an individual with a chronic illness, you're more than likely thinking that, where's my sense of worth? If I'm always sick all the
Absolutely.
time, or I'm always taking medication, or
Yes.
I'm always in the hospital, how do I contribute to this relationship? I'm not contributing towards the bills because I can't work. I'm not contributing towards any like household chores because at times I might get sick. So, how do we actually work through this as a couple unit so that you do have a sense of worth? You're not just a person with a chronic illness and a caregiver is taking care of you. You do have a sense of worth and you do have a role in your relationship.
Right. I think that's another part that we deal with as a caregiver is our identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really goes out the window. And I know for
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm very type A. I like to have just thing boom, 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 boom. So to be
Mm-hmm.
thrust all of a sudden to get this kick in the gut of,
Yeah.
oh, you get to rewrite, you're gonna have to rewrite your own rule book now. You don't get to go
Mm-hmm.
by the actual outline that you had before with your healthcare career, where you get up on certain days, you go to work, work an
Right.
8-hour shift, you get X amount of money right now. Oh, now you're in the role of being an online entrepreneur. It takes time to build your brand, build your business, build your clientele. You're going to have to gain a whole lot of skills that people go to school for, and you're doing it from scratch. You're learning to care for an illness that is not curable and is so different. It's very individualistic and is for everybody. And then on
Mm-hmm.
top of it, you're dealing with your own illness and having to learn how
Right.
to write the real book. So, hello.
Right. And you definitely
It's
have to learn how to verbalize the stressors that you're going through
mhm.
with your partner, with
Yes,
a third party, because if you don't verbalize it today, it's going to be resentment tomorrow.
yes,
So resentment begins to build, and I feel like I'm doing everything because I'm the caregiver. What is this person bringing to the relationship? And that's the time when you say, maybe it's time for us to see a third person
right.
so
And I
that we can talk about this.
absolutely. Well, and I think another thing too is that with caregiving and with a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
the identity goes for both the person who's sick, obviously, because they can't do as much, and it goes for the person that's the caregiver and knowing your worth. And you feel like you're doing everything. But I think that's really when you really need to kick in the self-care piece some
Mm-hmm.
degree. I don't want to give too much away because we're going to do a part two, guys. So, but I will say with this is that that's when you really need to look at how you can keep that cup full. I know for me to kind of deal with getting those thoughts and feelings out, journaling has been a huge thing for me. I love journaling.
Absolutely.
Journaling
Mm-hmm.
has really helped me. Doing devotionals and things like that has helped as well because it's all intertwined. And even just the physicality, I mean, it does take a toll on you. So making sure you get enough sleep, you don't miss any meals, all that kind of bit, that ties into it as well. But even just getting outside. So, and sometimes getting a break. We're bad as caregivers
Mm-hmm.
with asking for a break. So whether
Mm-hmm.
it's I know for me, just having a break would be, being. I let myself binge some of my favorite YouTube while my daughter naps. I like to knit in the evening. I work on my knitting projects. So whatever that looks like for you, I want you to do that. So where do you need a break? Do you need to actually just ask your family or friends or someone from your church or congregation of faith, could you come and sit with my family for an hour or two while I go
Right.
get my haircut? Could you come and sit with my family while I run to my wellness visit? Do not skip your wellness
Absolutely.
visits, girl, guys. That's what got me into trouble in
Absolutely.
2021,
And
in
it's
2020.
having
Yeah,
having a
just
support
ask for help.
system. Having a
Right.
support system is amazing. I have a really amazing support system of friends who I can call or text at any sort of time if I'm feeling intensely stressed. At
Hmm.
the time, I have an amazing set of books that I like to read when I just don't feel like caregiving, because there's going to be times when I'm just like, you know what, I'm tired, I don't want to do this today, so I'm not going to do this,
Yeah.
because I understand with the chronic illness, if I continue to push and push and push, I've done that before to the extent where, oh god, now I'm in the hospital. Having a chronic illness means you are going to have an immense amount of hospital bills. So would you rather pay the hospital bills, would you rather start taking better care of yourself? So
Right.
that's in my younger days. Now as I'm pushing 40, I'm realizing that there's certain things that I need to have in place in order to be the best person that I can be. So there's times when I tell myself or tell my family, hey, I am going on a trip. I won't be back for the next 5 days. Don't contact me,
Right.
because I'm not the only child. There are other siblings that can take care of my mother. I'm
Yeah.
not the only person here. So
Right.
it's not
And
about asking, though. It's not about, with some families, it's not about asking. It's about telling them, this
mhm.
is what I'm going to do. You need to make provisions in order for this to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Caregiving shouldn't just rely on that one person. It should also be, first of all, I'm African, so it should be a village.
Yeah,
If
I
I
like that. I like
if I
that.
step out for about 45 minutes to go and get groceries, thank God I'm breathing for those 45 minutes. But you know what? I can also knock on my neighbor's door and tell her, hey, I'm going outside for 45 minutes to get some groceries. Can you just make sure that, you check up on her every now and then? And don't do that. That's the beauty of having a support system and a village to help you take care of someone. Now, granted, they're not here all the time. but
Right.
and granted, they might not be able to do that all the time, but it's nice to know that if I step out for a few, that someone is there to check up on her while I'm gone.
Right. And you might have to get creative with that support network.
Yeah.
Okay. In 2020, when we were shut down from the pandemic, my coach and the mastermind, which I'm still being trained in today, so shout out to Faith Mariah. I love my girls. That became my family. That became my support network because there are a lot of moms in that community. And that really became my support network during that time in that season. So it's a little unorthodox and it's a little backwards. I didn't have the moms group. Like I just actually got plugged into a moms group this last month at my church. So I'm getting that piece now of actual nourishment from other moms. But when I started my journey and in the season and extenuating circumstances that in which that season began, I had to get a little creative. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
So,
and creativity also means you can also go online to find a support group. Facebook has an enormous amount of support groups for almost any and everything. So having a support group for my chronic illness has been amazing. And also having a support group for caregivers has been amazing. So we can go in there and vent at 3 a.m. in the morning. You can go in there and vent, and there'll be people that'll respond to your post and giving you encouragement to move on to the next day. Or sometimes just sitting in there and reading what everybody else is going through and realizing that I am not the only person in the world who is actually going through this. And there's so many others who are experiencing this, and normalizing the experience that you're going through.
right. Yeah. And then for you too, it might be, this was perfect to segue into my next question. You might be the one to start something too, maybe because you see a need. I know for me, I could not, was my problem. I looked at Facebook. I looked at a lot of different things at the time. There was not a lot of stuff targeting a younger mom that she did not plan to be a stay-at-home mom due to the significant other making a well income and caregiving under 65. Okay. And still having small kids at home. I was not caring for a special needs child. I was not the one physically going through epilepsy. I was not caregiving necessarily for looking for something for caregiving for my parents or grandparents. I was looking for caregiving for my spouse at a younger age. So that's the whole reason my business exists, is I want to be a coach and a mentor for the moms and give them the experience that I never had. So that's my journey into why my business became what it is and why it exists. So what inspired you? I know you have professional training anyway, and you were used to seeing clients in person and brick and mortar. So what inspired you to tweak your work into going online? Besides, I know there is the obviously no-brainer need for being a caregiver and need to be home, but still not everyone does that. Not everyone still segues into an online business or doing an online job. Some of them just drop their career altogether and be a full-time caregiver, mom, daughter, whatever the situation might be.
Well, I knew that there was a larger purpose in what it is that I was called to do. So I wasn't just going to not do any form of work just because a pandemic had occurred. So so the pandemic actually gave me, as an introvert, it gave me a lot of time to kind of perfect what it is that I wanted to do, because I've always had this idea that I would be in private practice doing consultation in hospitals and adjunct faculty. So I told myself, now was the time to actually start doing this. You can start your business now from home and also be a caregiver. And I also realized, I don't know if I really want to be in a hospital setting with the pandemic going on. So for me, it was just also an issue of safety. I'm taking care of an elderly individual. So when I go outside, I had to make sure I had my gloves on. I had a mask on. I still wear a mask because I'm also a germaphobe. So I don't, if someone's sneezing, everyone notices, like everyone turns around. If you're sneezing, I more than likely don't want to be around you, because what people don't understand is that when you have a chronic illness, your immune system is shot to hell.
Yeah.
Someone would have a cold for about a week. When my chronic illness journey first started, I would have a cold for about 6 months. Some of my friends and I still laugh about that. Like, do you remember you had that cold for about 6 months? Yeah, I remember. It wasn't the best. So I also have to make sure that I protect myself in order to make sure that she's protected. So I told myself, hey, go ahead and start this business. You'll be at home. You'll be able to take care of her, and you'll be able to take care of yourself. So working in a hospital setting or a clinic or a community mental health agency, it is a lot. I remember coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning from doing treatment plans and assessments and telling myself, I hope you don't plan on doing this for the rest of your life. The clients were absolutely amazing, but the politics of community mental health, sometimes it can take an immense toll on your life. And
Oh yeah.
I was exhausted. I
Hmm.
was exhausted, and having to just make sure that I'm okay throughout the day. I have my tea, I'm wearing comfortable shoes, I'm wearing comfortable clothes, because I don't want to, I don't want to incite a flare up. I don't
Right.
want to be too
Absolutely.
stressed to the point where, oh, now I'm getting sick, because a flare up doesn't just take you out for a day. It might take you out for a couple of days, maybe even a week or so. And I told myself, great, you have an online practice. I can see my clients right here, and then I can roll over and go to sleep if I need to, right next to me on my bed. So
Right.
for me, it was very convenient, and it was the next best thing to do outside of actually having to go to an actual like brick and mortar to see my clients. And it's also a level of convenience for the individuals who have to be at home, who are caregiving, and who have to be at home because they have a chronic illness. So sometimes my clients are in bed, and that's perfectly okay with me. I can understand that you are not feeling up to sitting up and at a desk or on your couch to see me, but you're well enough to get on this phone or your computer and see me from bed. And a lot of my clients will tell me I can't skip out on having mental health services because I know what that'll do to me. This is my self-care, and I need to come into my sessions. But I always remind them, hey, if you're really not feeling well, we can always reschedule later on in the week. And I always make sure to text my clients to make sure, like, hey, how are you feeling today? Because I think that's also just a human connection. Sometimes
Right.
we
Absolutely.
forget in the beginning of our training, there's somewhat of a wall, and we're, as students, we're operating from this very Eurocentric standard way of delivering care. But
Hmm.
also, we have to realize that it's not just white folks who are therapists, it's also people of different cultures, religions, sexual orientations who are therapists, and we relate to each other differently. For example, like me having to ask my neighbor, hey, can you check up on my mom? That's very cultural. We can do that. So for me to check up on my clients, my African American clients, they don't have an issue with me contacting them. And it's interesting because clients will tell me, I expect that. I expect you to text me and message me, because that's just how we operate as very collectivistic culture. Me being Ghanaian American and a lot of my clients being Black across the diaspora, it is okay for us to check up on each other to make sure, hey, how are you doing? I know this is what we discussed yesterday. How are you feeling today? If a
Hmm.
client is speaking about suicidal ideation, as a therapist, I am obligated to check up on you within 24 to 48 hours of you telling me and giving me this information. So I'm going to make sure that you are okay. And that's just what I do as a therapist, and that's just what I do as a human being to make sure that my clients are okay in the caregiving role or the chronic illness that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know for me, being in the motherhood realm and being a stay-at-home mom, we're on the go. We don't always have
Yeah.
time. I mean, I make time, with building a business. I work, I
Mm-hmm.
that's the well, let me backtrack. My brain's getting ahead of my words here, but or the other way around. I don't know. Anyway, not enough coffee yet, guys. Anyway, but I love with the online business that I can curtail the hours to work around my needs, like you were saying, because that was another problem when I was looking doing during the typical job hunt when the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
hit of transition, really making that decision to look at transitioning home because it was just becoming so unsafe with the insane amount of seizure activity my husband was having. I ran into that problem. I only had a healthcare background in CNA work as a certified nursing assistant. So I had
Mm-hmm.
no RN license, no LPN license, no bachelor's, no master's, no other experience in any realm of industry. So, and anything that I could find that was more like telemarketing, which I really did not want to do, I would
Mm-hmm.
have to hit a quota of calls every day and be tied up my computer
Yeah.
for X amount of days without a break. So if I probably dropped something to take care of my little girl or my husband, I'd probably get fired, let go for not
Yeah.
hitting my deadlines. So I love with my business, I can set my deadlines. I have my set office hours that I do every week, or try to. Some days I drop them because my husband has a seizure. He's done for the day because it's like when he has a seizure, it's like he runs a 26-mile marathon. He has to sleep, he has to
Mm.
rest. And
Yeah.
plus, the medication I give him does make him sleepy and uncomfortable. So, and then I'm in mom mode for the rest of the day taking care of my little girl,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. So with that piece and bearing that in mind of dealing with small kids and dealing with, again, the like we were talking about, a chronic illness that's unpredictable, I wanted to create with my program for my clients being able to connect with them to where they don't feel tied down. So that's where my Voxer voice message coaching piece is tied in, why that's in my program. Texting is nice, and I do love messages, don't get me wrong, but I know for me, just something with hearing someone's actually hearing someone's voice just really is soothing. And so that's why I created my Voxer voice message component, to where I can just talk into my phone. We all have our phones by us.
Right.
So I can be holding my daughter if she's having a meltdown and speaking into my phone going, "Hey, Felicia, I'm right here. I understand." Or vice versa, like, "Hey, Melissa, I'm just having a really bad day. My toddler's getting into everything. So I feel like I'm going to lose it." Or, "I'm really scared because my husband just had a flare up, or my partner just had a flare up, and I have to send them to the hospital. And because of where we're at, they're not letting me ride in the ambulance with them, or they're not letting me sit in the hospital room with them because of the ongoing pandemic," so to speak. So having support in a way that is realistic to your life, I think is so important. I love how, so for you, with what the work that you do, I love that you have that component of, okay, are you okay? Do you really logistically feel up to having our session today, or do we need to back off? Or for me, with my dynamic, I'm available 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. Anytime they can message me as many times, anything for what they need for support. And I'm accessible. I'm just a voice message away. They'll get that human connection while I'm caregiving for my husband, while I'm running errands, while I'm still being a mom myself and running a business. I'm still there for my clients, but it's in a different way. It may not be on camera all the time, but they're hearing my voice. They know that it's not just a robot talking to them and spamming them, type of thing. So
And
I think that's important.
An interesting dynamic I've also been seeing when I initially started the practice was an influx of elderly individuals wanting mental health services, and learning how to, I guess, move into a different role as the elderly parent, and now my millennial child is taking care of me. So I had a client that basically thought that counseling was me telling their child, "You have to listen to your mom, and you have to do this, and you have to." It's like, no, that's not how this works. So there's that interesting dynamic of me being a millennial caregiver myself and having elderly clients, which I absolutely love and adore. But I also have to realize that the relationship is different. So if I have a client that's in their 80s, once again, they're going to expect a phone call. And they also expect a certain type of dynamic in the therapist client type relationship. There's a certain level of respect that they're going to expect. And I truly love the dynamic in working with elderly individuals and their millennial caregivers, because I can be in both roles of, I understand that you're an elder and this is what it is. And I also understand that you're a millennial, because I am too. And I definitely understand what it is that you're going through. So being able to work in that dynamic has also just been, it's been a learning experience and very enlightening for me. I absolutely love working with that population as well, the elderly population.
Yeah, I love that. That's why I did work as a CNA. I did do a year and a half in home health, and I did so I had a more variety of clientele of ages of families that I worked with that work. And then I did do a year in a facility that was more for disabled adults, that had like really strong, like disabled, behaviors and adult behaviors. And it was a little too much for me. It was not my thing. I really loved the elderly population, because they're a population that is lots of time forgotten. And they and being in a nursing facility compared to a hospital, there is change, but it doesn't necessarily change every day. So I did have rehab patients that were there just to recover from a procedure or a lighter illness, but the majority of my patients were there long term. So I had a lot more monotony. I enjoyed that. Some people I trained in my career, other aides, when they were just finishing school, hated that. They preferred the hospital where you got new patients every day. I cannot stand that. I'm type A. I do better with a little bit more structure and routine and monotony, which is fine. So that's why I really gravitated towards long-term care facilities, because I got to have that long-term relationship with both my coworkers as well as my patients. And so when I was looking towards my business, I wanted to do a bit of that. I wanted to have a business where I get to build lasting, intentional relationships with my clients, and also just be there for them in a way that no one else is being there for them, in an accessible way. Absolutely. Because like I know you full well know, when you're a caregiver, and you're dealing with chronic illness, you can't leave the home a lot. And so how do you get
Mm-hmm.
that accessibility of having that intentional conversation with somebody else that just gets it? Sometimes you just need to have that moment where you get, girl, I got you. I know what you're going through.
Right.
Just vent it all out. Just yell it to me. You know what I mean? We need that. We all need that in different seasons
Absolutely.
of our lives. And I think that's so important. So
Mm-hmm.
you really answered my last few questions. So let's go
Mm-hmm.
into, our time is running out for this episode, but what are your 3 best caregiving tips that you would like to share with our listeners and watchers?
Well, self-care, which is something we'll be talking about in our next live. Self-care,
Yeah,
make
our
sure
next
that you are
episode, part 2. Yeah, part 2 is coming next week. We're doing a 2-part opener.
mm-hmm.
Dr. Owoo wanted to talk both on caregiving and self-care, but I think since they're intertwined, but they're
Right.
also kind of separate, I wanted to make sure that we had time to focus really hardcore on both episodes. And this episode was more, guys, so you could get to know a little bit about
Yeah.
Dr. Owoo. So when we kick in with our best
Mm-hmm.
self-care tips in part 2, it would kind of make more sense. So we will be
So then I'll
touching
leave.
we'll be
So then I'll
touching
leave
on
that piece
self-care
out.
next week. Yeah.
So then I'll leave out the self-care piece. So therapy and asking for help. So if asking for help means that you're asking, if you're living in that type of neighborhood, asking neighbors for help if they know the person that you're taking care of, especially if it's an elderly individual. Asking friends for help and just having a support system of individuals who know you, who can support you, who can give you that love when you need it. And also even joining a Facebook support group, which might be helpful because there's so many Facebook support groups that are coming out, and finding something, I love calling it getting back to yourself. Finding something
I love that.
finding something that you used to do that you're no longer doing because you're so severely stressed, and getting back to it. So whether it's yoga, I do my self-care Fridays and self-care Sundays where I'm doing my hair, or I'm reading a book, which reminds me I have to bring this book up, or I'm reading a book and I'm doing something for myself that does not include taking care of anybody else. Because once again, if you break down, then everything else goes to crapper, right? So we have to make sure that we're honestly taking care of ourselves. And we'll probably talk about that more in our next session. But I also wanted to mention this book that I usually suggest to my clients when someone you love has a chronic illness. So right
I love it.
there.
And what's the author so we know about that?
Let's
What's the
see.
author?
Tamara McClintock, Greenberg Saidi.
Yeah.
I hope I'm pronouncing her first name correctly.
I think you did. She sounds familiar. I haven't personally read any of her books, but the name sounds familiar. So, but anyway, so definitely check out that book. Where can people find you if they are in a situation where they're like, you know what, I think we're in that season where we do need to look at a third party, or even if they're not for sure that they want to work with you or are ready for that, but they just want to ask questions or know about what you do. Where can people find you?
So I am on Facebook under FKL Therapy and Consultation Services, and every week I post something regarding chronic illness. And the month of November, I'll specifically be talking about caregivers. I'm also on Instagram under FKL Therapy, where once again posting about chronic illness and caregiving, and also my website, www.fkltherapyandconsultation.com. It's a long title, so just type in my name, Dr. Francesca Owoo, in Google, and you can just find the listing. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And also, if you're interested in reading anything about my research, I've also have publications on being a primary caregiver to a child with a chronic illness. You can also find that online as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Also, what is something in our conversation or in your journey, either way you want to take it, that's been inspirational to you?
I think I know working with my clients. Working with my clients just gives me a sense of joy, knowing that I am able to give to someone and that I'm not necessarily pouring from an empty cup, and that I'm able to actually be a support to someone who is going through a really stressful situation.
Nice. I like that. And lastly, is there any free or paid resource that you would like to share with our audience that you did not mention, or maybe isn't really highlighted in your social media or your website, or that's coming soon that you would like to throw a little nugget out there for?
I'm working on that right now. I'm working on providing a group for individuals who have chronic illness or for individuals who are primary caregivers to an elderly parent or a child with a chronic illness. So that has been in the works for quite some time now.
Nice. Do we have a drop date soon, or is it still
We do
just
not have a drop date.
Oh, rats. So, all
We
right.
do not have a drop date. I'm still working on that.
All right. Well, guys, make sure that you're following Dr. Owoo on all of her social media handles, on her website. So that way you're in the loop about when she has updates about that drop date that's coming for her group, which I think is so amazing because there needs to be groups. There's so many groups that need to be available, and everyone's different too. Everybody has different personalities, different needs. And so what resonates and works with one person obviously may not work with someone else, and that's fine.
Right.
So I am so excited for what you will do with your work in the Q4. Can you believe we are in Q4? Where has the year gone? It's insane. Oh my goodness. Also, guys, my Finding Your Balance program opens on October 24th. I am very excited. So the waitlist is open. So if you are for those of you listening or rewatching the replay on YouTube or here on Instagram, if you are a younger stay-at-home mom that has also been navigating recently caring for your spouse with a chronic illness or chronic injury unexpectedly, get on the wait list for my Finding Your Balance program. I have digital resources. I teach you how to be prompt, which is preparing for the unexpected, reaching out for support, getting organized at home, managing your busy schedule, prioritizing that whole body self-care, right? Dr. Owoo and I will be touching on that next week. So come back for part 2 and telling your story to inspire and to heal. So doors are open. Link will be in the description box. I'll have details there as well as a link in my bio if you're watching here on Instagram. And if you have questions, we have a little bit of time. Dr. Owoo and I will be back next week, Monday the 10th at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for part 2, where we will be talking about finding balance in prioritizing your self-care. Because as caregivers, as moms, as kids, or adults, if you will, adult children caring for our elderly parents or grandparents, whatever your demographic is, it is so important that we take care of ourselves first and foremost. Otherwise, we will tap out and burn out the hard way. And I don't want that for any of you. So be sure to submit questions. If you have questions, leave them in the comments to the videos and to the video, and we can check back and look at those questions and address those for some Q&A at the end of part 2. Also, if you want to actually I'm sorry, not enough coffee, guys. If you want to submit a question, I do have a questionnaire that I will link below. And also, you can also just apply if you want to be a guest on the show if you're as well. So be sure to check that out as well. So lots of good stuff happening. Season 1 is going to be amazing. And I just hope that you remember that we're not alone. We're doing the best we can. We know our families and ourselves and our illnesses better than anybody else, and that we're allowed to give ourselves grace on those hard mom or caregiver days, or even just days where we're just feeling a little overwhelmed with dealing with our illness ourselves. So stay tuned for part 2. We'll see you next week. Dr. Owoo, thank you so much for your time and being my special guest for the season 1 opener. And you guys take care. And again, just leave comments below and go follow Dr. Owoo for more inspirational content on caregiving and managing chronic illness. All right, guys, take care.